In the dimmest corners of the Imperium's forbidden archives, those vaults sealed by sigil, oath, and the weight of 1,000 erasures, there lies a truth so fractured that even the adept assigned to its containment dare not speak its shape aloud. The air within such catacombs tastes of dust older than empires, each drifting mote a silent witness to historical betrayals buried beneath parchment and rusted data looms. Visual. Ancient archives lit by flickering lumen globes, and yet, despite these labyrinths of silence, one certainty remains unshaken by time or decree. Games Workshop never reveals everything. But why? What darkness is so profound that not even the endless hunger of the Imperium's chronicle machinery can fully consume it? What narratives are carved away, sharpened into half-truths, or shrouded beneath layers of myth, so dense they crush the breath of clarity itself? There are secrets in this universe, terrible, foundational secrets, that warp not just knowledge, but the very perception of history. They form a tapestry with more threads removed than woven, a puzzle sculpted from absence. The galaxy, in all its unending war, was built upon forgotten stories, and within those omissions lies a power far greater than any recorded victory. Some claim such concealments were intentional from the earliest days of humanity's stellar dominion. They whisper that the Emperor himself forbade certain records, not for their danger to the Imperium, but for the danger they pose to understanding him. Others assert that the ruinous powers twist truth through the warp, stripping coherence from mortal attempts at remembrance. Visual. Warp storm swallowing star charts. And then there are those who say the Mechanicus, in its fervor for preservation or exploitation, filters everything through a logic so alien that meaning is often reduced to ritual. But perhaps the deeper reason is simpler. The galaxy is too vast, too ancient, too utterly consumed by cycles of destruction and rebirth for any authority to grasp its totality. And so we glimpse fragments, suggestive silhouettes of truths long since drowned beneath the tide of blood and ash. Consider the lost stars once charted during the Great Crusade. Imperial records speak of worlds burning bright with potential, only to vanish from navigational codices after the Horus Heresy. Dozens of expeditionary fleets are said to have encoded their findings into crystalline memory keeps, each the size of a warrior's fist, but many such relics were never recovered after the legions of Astartes turned upon one another. Visual. Shattered star maps, scratched with runes of redaction. There is no official explanation, only silence, empty spaces where proud civilizations once stood, a blankness more terrifying than any recorded tragedy. These are the absences that shape the universe. These are the shadows that define its borders. Even within the hallowed halls of the Imperial Palace on Terra, statues of forgotten heroes stand in alcoves without plaques or inscriptions, colossal figures cast in obsidian, their names struck from remembrance, their deeds whispered only in the dreams of psychers who wander too close to their presence. Some say they were generals who defied the Emperor before unity was fully forged. Others believe they were beings not entirely human, champions of proto-empires lost to prehistory. If truth exists, it is sealed beneath 10,000 layers of bureaucratic oblivion. And yet, the deeper mystery lies not in what is hidden, but in what escapes erasure. Why do certain myths persist across millennia despite every effort to extinguish them? Why do fragments of ancient xenoscripts appear in worlds separated by thousands of light years? Why do some patterns of warp disturbance echo records of long night entities no longer acknowledged by any living authority? Visual. Starfield distorted by warp echoes, these inconsistencies, the gaps in the tapestry, invite us not merely to question history, but confront the idea that history itself is incomplete by design. The truth behind hidden lore is not simply that it is concealed. It is curated, managed, shaped. In many ways, the Imperium has become the warden of its own partial memory, clinging to pieces of truth useful for survival, while abandoning those too burdensome or destabilizing. It is a civilization built on selective remembrance, pruning its past as ruthlessly as it prunes dissent. After all, what purpose does truth serve in a galaxy where understanding invites madness? In a universe where knowing too much can draw the gaze of beings who devour sanity as readily as tyranids consume flesh? Yet even so, the darkness calls. For beneath the layers of imperial decree, ecclesiarchal censorship, Mechanicus dogma, and warp-distorted recollection lies a reality so intricate and unending that no single authority, mortal or divine, can fully command it. And in that fractured, obscured reality, we find the hidden lore that shapes all fates. The stories never told, the gods never named, the wars never recorded, and the betrayals so catastrophic they're denied even the dignity of memory. Thus begins our descent into the unseen, the forgotten, the forbidden. Let the archives open not in truth, but in speculation sharpened by absence. Let the shadows reveal the contours of what cannot be spoken. Let us trace the outlines of that which Games Workshop never reveals, yet which echoes across the galaxy like the dying breath of a star. For every silence has a shape, and every omission hides a purpose. There are whispers, threads of lore scattered like broken runes across the ruins of 1,000 shattered worlds, that suggest even the earliest chroniclers of the Imperium knew they recorded only fragments. Their duty was not to preserve truth, but to forge a narrative strong enough to bind a civilization perpetually on the verge of collapse. Visual. Scriptoriums filled with robed adepts copying text by candlelight, but in creating the approved histories, they inadvertently preserve hints of what lay beneath their carefully curated tales. Consider the Age of Strife, a period so violently chaotic that many historians assume records were lost simply through devastation. Yet hidden among the fragments are references to civilizations of staggering power, arcane human empires wielding psychic technologies surpassing even the Emperor's most advanced creations. Some legends claim these forgotten nations communicated across the void not with astropaths, but through constructs of living light, entities whose consciousness spanned entire sectors. Their disappearance is attributed to warp storms, but no one explains why no Xeno species recorded their existence. Then there are the Proto-Astartes, those genetic prototypes created before the Primarchs themselves. Official records insist they were flawed, unstable, unworthy of remembrance. Yet recovered data slates from dead Forge worlds describe warriors of impossible resilience and disturbing temperament, beings who wielded not only gene-forged might, but also psychic resonance. Visual. Broken stasis pods in a ruined Mechanicus vault. Their existence disrupts the accepted narrative that the Emperor perfected the Astartes only after crafting the Primarchs. Why erase them? Why deny that earlier experiments walked the stars? Some archivists believe they know the answer. They speak of a hidden war fought in the shadows of the Great Crusade, a conflict between the Emperor's early creations and the more refined legions that followed. If such events occurred, the implications would be devastating. The Imperium's foundations were built not upon unity, but upon internal purging and quiet annihilation of prototypes whose loyalty proved inconvenient. Yet even this is minor compared to the mysteries surrounding the Primarchs themselves. From a moment of their scattering, contradictions emerge. Some texts claim the ruinous powers abducted them instantly upon creation. Others imply the Emperor intentionally allowed the warp to touch them, believing exposure would grant them perspective. Stranger still are the almost erased accounts describing additional gestation capsules, never recovered. Visual. Ghostly silhouettes of unused Primarch pods. If true, were there more than 20 Primarchs originally crafted? Were some deemed failures? Were some destroyed before the scattering? The Imperium maintained silence. Games Workshop, likewise, leave these voids unfilled. Other secrets lie buried within the alien cultures humanity has encountered. Consider the Eldari. Their histories extend so far into antiquity that human timelines appear as fleeting breaths by comparison. And yet even among their crystalline mind archives, there are abrupt blanks, eras excised with surgical precision. Eldari seers refuse to speak of these intervals, turning away with expressions of profound grief or terror. One might assume their lost empire simply consumed itself through excess, but there are veiled hints of encounters with forces so ancient they defy categorization. Some refer to the nameless thrones, entities predating even the Old Ones. And speaking of the Old Ones, how often have Imperial scholars sought definitive truth about them? Their remnants, twisted labyrinths scattered across dead worlds, constructs humming with power millennia after their creators vanished, suggest mastery over the warp, matter, and even fate. Yet their history, too, is fragmented. Why do all reference texts concerning them contain identical patterns of omission, as if an entire chapter was deliberately cut from the universal script? Visual. Monolithic alien ruins glowing with fading energies. These patterns of erasure continue into the Horus heresy itself. Frequently, we encounter hints of actions undertaken by Primarchs that never appear in standard accounts. Lorgar's pilgrimage includes mentions of beings from the Halls of Ash, never explained. Perturabo's private journals include diagrams of impossible geometric forms, suggesting he encountered something that challenged even his iron logic. Magnus' lamentations refer to a betrayal deeper than Horus's rebellion, one concerning the very nature of the Emperor's grand design. If these scattered pieces are assembled, and even attempting such assembly is deemed heretical, the galaxy's true history becomes a mosaic of suppressed revelations, a picture distorted not by chaos, not by time, but by design. For the Imperium were to acknowledge its missing chapters, its censored battles, its concealed origins, and its forsaken creations, it might unravel entirely. Humans cling to order, to structure, to sanction lore. Remove enough pillars and the entire edifice collapses. This fragile architecture of half-truths is why the Adeptus Terra enforces information control with unyielding zeal. It is why the Inquisition burns records before they spread. It is why the Astartes maintain enclosed histories, each chapter guarding its sagas like a predator guarding fresh-killed prey. And it is why, even today, Games Workshop presents glimpses rather than totalities. For the hidden lore is not merely secret. It is dangerous. And in the end, danger is the core of all things in the grim darkness of the far future. Soon their silence will yield, and revelations long buried shall ignite the stars. Theories arise like spectral forms clawing their way out of the warp. Shapeless at first, then slowly cohering into something vast, unsettling, and impossible to ignore. If the known galaxy is but a cracked mirror, then each fractured reflection hints at deeper truths lurking behind the silver glass. One such theory concerns the Emperor himself. Some scholars argue that he was not merely a product of ancient shamans sacrificing their spirits into a single entity, but the culmination of a far older cycle, one orchestrated by the Old Ones long before humanity crawled from Terra's primordial seas. Visual. Shadowy figure the Emperor standing amidst solar eclipses. Could the Emperor have been a contingency, forged not by human desperation but by alien intervention? If so, the Imperium's foundational myth is not a story of human ascendance, but humanity unknowingly fulfilling a design laid down in an age beyond comprehension. Others counter with an even darker speculation, that the Emperor was never singular at all, but absorbed countless proto-gods across millennia, cannibalizing ideologies, psychic reservoirs, and fragments of warped dominions to forge supremacy. If names and deeds have been erased from the record, it may be because those ancient beings still linger in the warp, whispering their claims upon him. Then there are the theories surrounding the two lost Primarchs, those sons whose legacies are so utterly annihilated that even their ruins leave no dust behind. Some propose they were simply failures. Others suggest they defied the Emperor in ways too shameful to record. Yet a compelling hypothesis implies they may never have been destroyed at all, but folded into the fabric of the warp, ascending perhaps, or becoming conceptual entities whose influence persists quietly, shaping events in ways unnoticed by mortal eyes. Visual, vague outlines of two armored giants dissolving into warp fire. If true, their absence is not a deletion but a metamorphosis. Even the Chaos gods bear contradictions in their supposed origins. Khorne, Nurgle, Tsench, and Slaanesh are said to have been born from mortal emotions and excesses. Yet this raises a paradox so glaring it borders on absurdity. How did galaxies teem with sentient species long before humanity arose? Did none of them feel rage, despair, ambition, or indulgence? The existence of the warp predates the birth of these gods. So what, then, filled that void before they emerged? Either other deities existed and were destroyed, or the Chaos gods have rewritten reality retroactively, altering their own origins and erasing rivals from existence. Visual, warp rifts spiraling with impossible colors. This possibility makes every omission in the historical record suspect. If even the past can be rewritten, how can any account be trusted? Xeno's histories provide little clarity. The Necrons speak of entities devoured by the Tan, some of which do not match any known star gods. The Orcs preserve crude legends of brain boys who shaped them, yet the timeline conflicts with the accepted fall of the Old Ones. Meanwhile, The Eldari maintained they shaped the webway independently, but scattered ruins beneath dead maiden worlds suggest architectures older than their civilization. These contradictions pile upon each other like ossified bones in a mass grave, creating a landscape of uncertainty where truth and myth intertwine. Perhaps the greatest contradiction lies within the concept of imperial stagnation. How does a species capable of creating the Golden Throne, the Astronomicon, and the Primarchs suddenly devolve into a civilization incapable of basic innovation? Some claim it is cultural collapse. Others argue the Mechanicus suppresses advancement. But a more disturbing theory suggests external sabotage, that an unseen enemy, neither Chaos nor Xenos, systematically cripples human progress from the shadows. Evidence? Whispered patterns in research logs. Scientists disappearing without trace. Prototype technologies vanishing before mass production. Visual. Shadowy figures watching from maintenance tunnels. If a hidden hand indeed guides humanity's stagnation, then Games Workshop's own reluctance to reveal certain lore may reflect this metapattern, a narrative echo of a universe constrained by unseen architects. Another theory concerns the Void Dragon on Mars. If the Emperor defeated and bound a tan shard beneath the planet's crust, why has neither Mars nor Terra fallen to Necron reclamation forces? Some suggest the Necrons fear the dragon's awakening. Others argue Mechanicus unknowingly worships the enslaved shard, thus reinforcing its prison. But a minority of scholars propose a far more chilling idea, that the Emperor intended to integrate the dragon into his long-term plan, forming a hybrid god-machine capable of rewriting physical law. Such a revelation would tear apart the foundations of both Imperial and Necron cosmology, where, then, do these theories converge? At the shadows, the omissions, the carefully avoided explanations. Even timelines show distortion. The war in heaven spans millions of years, yet some records place its aftermath dangerously close to the human age of expansion. Warp echoes within Astartes' relics reveal signatures inconsistent with their recorded forging. And some events, such as the destruction of the Rangdan or the disappearance of the Interrex, seem to occur simultaneously and yet impossibly far apart. Scholars call it chronological drift. Inquisitors call it heresy. But those who have stared into the warp know better. Reality is not fixed. Time itself is a wounded animal. And so the hidden lore remains scattered across phantom pathways, glimpsed only in brief reflections along the warp-touched edges of knowledge. It is impossible to grasp and hold, for the universe refuses coherence. It was never meant to be understood with mortal minds. In such shadows, even certainty becomes a fragile illusion, trembling before truths too vast to contain. Secrets linger beyond mortal comprehension. If all that has been hidden shapes the present, then what of the future? What unspoken truths still wait within the vaults of Games Workshop's uncharted lore? Those fragments too potent, too devastating, or too reality warping to unveil? The first possibility concerns the Emperor's ultimate fate. Official narratives present him as a perpetual sacrifice, maintaining the Astronomicon through will alone. Yet some forbidden texts hint that his consciousness is not confined to the Golden Throne, but extends through psychic pathways across the galaxy. Visual. Dimly lit throne room, golden corpse beneath shifting shadows. If portions of the Emperor's mind walk the warp, then the future of humanity may hinge on realms beyond physical understanding. Does he commune with ancient beings? Does he confront entities erased from myth? Or does he search for truth among memories the Imperium has long suppressed? Such questions lead inevitably to the Primarchs. Of the lost sons we have spoken, but what of the returning ones? Guilliman bears not only scars of battle, but hints of knowledge gleaned during his near-death visions. Some claim he witnessed the Emperor with clarity, others that he beheld something far more ancient, a force that predates both humanity and chaos. If Guilliman knows a hidden truth, then his silence speaks louder than any proclamation. Then there is the matter of the Tyranids. They are said to come from beyond a known galaxy. But what lies beyond? Why do their hive fleets avoid certain cosmic vectors entirely, as though vast stellar territories terrify even them? Visual. Cosmic vista with Tyranid tendrils avoiding a dark region. Some posit that an elder horror slumbers in that direction. Others believe the Tyranids flee from something greater, perhaps the true architects of life, beings whose mere presence unravels biological stability. The Necrons, too, betray unusual behavior. Their dynasties reawaken unevenly, as if responding to a signal lost to time. Their silent kings speak of the final sequence, yet refuse to elaborate. What sequence? What cosmic alignment? And why do no records exist of its earlier iterations, despite hints found in stasis crypt inscriptions? Perhaps the galaxy has cycled through epochs of awakening and oblivion repeatedly, with each renewal erasing the memory of the last. If so, the hidden lore we seek is not merely forgotten. It is overwritten. Even chaos, with all its absolute corruption, holds its secrets. The gods' power waxes and wanes without clear pattern. Warp tides rise in perfect synchrony with the fall of distant stars. And there are cracks, thin, trembling seams, where new warp entities strain for birth. Some are proto-gods, barely conscious. Others are ancient beings returning from imposed annihilation. But one truth stands above all. If new gods arise, old histories must fall. This galaxy is not static. It is molting. And in the molting lies revelation. What of the Black Library? Even the Harlequins who guard admit that its content shifts. New chambers appear. Old ones dissolve. Knowledge itself transforms. Could it be that hidden lore is not merely suppressed, but alive? A sentient archive reacting to cosmic evolution? If so, Games Workshop's silence mirrors the universe's own mutability. Every story is but a temporary truth. Yet for all these speculations, the most haunting mysteries remain those tied to humanity's earliest epochs. Archaeological teams across the Imperium stumble upon relics predating known human expansion, relics inscribed with Terran linguistic patterns. How could such artifacts exist light years from humanity's cradle, before warp travel was developed? Visual. Explorers brushing sand off an ancient, human-marked monolith. Perhaps mankind once spanned the stars and fell before rising again. Or perhaps multiple human species emerged independently, guided by forces whose motives remain obscured. The Mechanicus, if it knows the answer, will never speak it. And so we return to the fundamental question. What truths remain hidden not because they are dangerous, but because they challenge the very narrative of existence? Perhaps the Imperium endures not due to strength, but because it forgets. Perhaps ignorance is the armor that shields humanity from recognizing its insignificance in a cosmos filled with predators, gods, and being sculpted from the bones of reality itself. But inevitability approaches. The galaxy trembles. Warp storms multiply. Hive fleets converge, and ancient powers stir beneath layers of forgotten epics. The pattern is unmistakable. Some great culmination draws near, a convergence of threads long severed. And when that moment arrives, the hidden lore, those secrets Games Workshop has never revealed, may burst into the open like a supernova tearing through the veil. Thus the galaxy waits, holding its breath as ancient powers stir beneath layers of forgotten epics. And as the final veil descends over our exploration, the silence that follows is not empty. It is charged, humming with the promise of revelation yet to come. For in the grim darkness of the far future, even secrets cast shadows, and those shadows are awakening. Soon, their awakening will echo across eternity. Inevitably,